Okay, Ed, so you were telling us about Briggs Motors.
Yeah, well, eventually I'd walk up and talk to them, you know, and in no time at all they would say, well, why don't you come to our branch meeting? So, first of all I said, okay, yeah, and then, you know, I'd go there and I'd really enjoy it, you know, they'd have a speaker like we do and so on, and yeah, I got into it. And then, of course, said, would you like to... I joined the first time I went to the branch. And then they said, I said, I don't mind joining, but I ain't coming to sell in the paper. Yeah. But I suppose, because you feel a bit conspicuous, when you first sell the paper, you feel a bit conspicuous, a bit embarrassed perhaps, but you know, obviously I've lost all that now. But anyway, so then I thought, well, if I'm going to join something like this, I've got to know a bit about it, you know. It's not enough just to join. So I started going to educationals. I used to run quite a lot, Marx, Lenin, Engels, so on. They never run anything about Trotsky or anything like that, or, you know. But nevertheless, you know, it was, I found it thoroughly involving and intriguing and interesting. And so, you know, I really got into it. And it wasn't long, you know, and then my after about 2.25 years, I was involved in strikes there as well. Right, okay. Yeah, and one strike I can vividly remember that there was a bloke who refused to pay his union. He was in the union, but it got behind him, and he refused to pay his things, and he was mixing, and there was a kind of feeling that he was mixing with the foreman and that, and he was being actively encouraged not to pay his union. So it led to a strike. We're not working with him, right? So the whole factory goes out. And then this was when the communist, you know, like I'm talking about, the electricity union was run literally, the leadership was party members. Frank Fawkes and Frank, anyway, we came, and the electricians, you know, the rumour was, I wasn't an electrician, but the rumour was, strong rumour, it'd be around the communists a little bit, the electricians had gone and spoke to Fawkes and said, don't matter what happens, we will pull the plugs on the plant and you won't open for 6 months. So straight away they folded. And I can remember walking or marching round the plant. We marched to the plant, in the plant, all round the plant, everywhere, cheering. You could not believe the kind of atmosphere. It was one of triumph, you know.
When was that? Can you give that a year?
Pardon?
What year was that?
I can't remember. It would have been I went there in I went to the docks in 1960, so it would have been about maybe 58, something like that, maybe 59, who knows, I can't remember exactly.
Right, okay.
But in any event, I think they made a film, The Angry Silence,
Yes.
not entirely based on it, but that kind of thing.
Right, okay.
And it was a very anti-communist film.
Yeah.
I think it was Richard Attenborough, I think it was, and
Yeah, I think you're right.
the Italian actress, I can't remember her name. And but in any event, you know, that was my first, if you like, really powerful feeling of what workers can achieve if they, you know. And so, and then that bloke, they couldn't get rid of him in the end. You know, he ended up in Southampton because there was a place in Southampton, Ford's, and they went out on strike. They wouldn't have him there, so that was that. He you know. Anyway,
Wow.
because you know, like any army, and that is really, we are a class army. When you're in that situation, you are a class army, and you've got to have class discipline. You know, but instead of being an army for them, it's an army for us. So we have to have discipline as well. And you know, there's an art to going on strike. There's things that you have to learn. For example, I guess to give you one example, that when you're on strike, it's important to drive the thing forward. You know, if you can, look outside of yourself. Try and involve as wide an army, as big an army as you can get. So you have to build that. You have to build solidarity. You have to build it. You know, most of these things are industries, and they can consist of maybe several different companies, or even the same company with plants in different regions. You've got to try and reach out and embrace all of it in order to make the thing more powerful and more successful. So you it's very difficult, almost nigh impossible almost, to revive a waning strike. You know, it's what you do in the early times that kind of fixes the way the thing moves and you know, moves forward. So yeah, so these are things you have to learn over years, you know, and speaking to others who've more experience than yourself.
So did the Communist Party, did they try to bring wider politics into the factory as well? You know, were they wider politics?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, I remember, I can't remember his name. You know, my memory now, I'm 87, it's names particularly, who I haven't worked with for years. Even, you know, like they start, I can see the person in my mind's eye, but I can't put the name to it. But anyway, there was, I know his name was Fred, and I can't remember his second name. He was an engineer in the tool makers and that, you know, tool maker in Fords, or as it became, because Briggs motor bodies became a part of Fords.
Right.
And we went on a 3-shift system, no, a 2-shift system I think it was, maybe became anyway, on the night shift, Fred, the tool maker, who was quite an intelligent bloke, we would have, this is in Fords, we would have educationals, Marxist educationals. And Fred was quite good at economics as well, and so, you know, I mean, kind of, it sparked my interest in economics, you know, because it is fascinating how things, the whole thing shifts and moves, and obviously it's so complex that, especially within the realms of capital, that it's hard to be harsh and because it's a thing that's moving all the time. It's dynamic, and so to calculate exactly is almost an impossibility. You know, you can kind of get a broad idea of where things are going, but you can't be absolutely certain. You know. Anyway, he used to hold these educationals at Marxism, of Marxism in the plant, and eventually I went into the docks. You know, I can remember the date, 1st of April Fool's Day, 1960, and my dad takes me down there, go to work, but he's already working. He sees a pal of his, he says, "Look, John, do us a favour, take my son on the call," which is where you got called on. And so I went with John. I didn't know him, but he was a mate of my dad's, so younger than my dad. And so we went up the call, pick up a job. I've just got on this job, so now they take your book out of your hand. You have a book, and if you don't go to work, if there's not enough work for you, They pick out that you're all lining up. The foreman picks you all out. It might be a gang. They might pick a whole gang out, or they might pick an individual. You know, the gang might need 2 pro ratas, so they pick 2 individuals. Anyway, I'll go to work. I'll get on this ship, and for some reason, we're not starting work. And we look out of it, I'm thinking, I don't know what's going on, do I? And they're all looking around, they went, right, I'll go to tea. I thought, go to tea? We ain't done anything yet. Anyway, they had what they call mobiles. These women used to come around driving vans, and there'd be tea vans. So you'd get your cup of tea and stand around talking. And then, but before you went in the dock, you get there a bit early and you go in a cafe. There was loads of cafes all around. So that was that. So, and then, right, go back to the ship. Break's finished. We go back to the ship, hanging about. What the bloody hell? Well, I'll tell you what they were hanging about for. I didn't know. But what they were hanging about for were the barges. The barges hadn't been shunted, so they can't start work until the barges are underneath, because the stuff we're doing is going in the barge. It was Egyptian potatoes in baskets, big baskets, yeah. You had to load this thing up with baskets of Egyptian potatoes. But then, of course, they go, oh, the barges are under, right, but they stop. They go, then you're breaking down, you break down, you build up. Everything's going mad then.
Right.
It's gone from doing absolute nothing,
right.
Everything's going, you can't keep up with it, you know, it's going. And there's hooks flying about, and you've got a hook on, and you've got goes, and you've got to link the next one up, and you're going like this, my good God, what's going on? It was so hard work, you know.
Physically tough work.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Honestly, the work, and they were such hard workers, you know what I mean? It was just, it was all in the family. It was in, you know, it was like, you find it hard at first, but gradually you get into it, and you know, you're carrying beef. I mean, some of that beef that we carried weighed up to sort of 350 pounds of beef, like holding it like that, and running with it, literally trying to run with it. Sometimes the ship would take a list, and the floor would be slippery as well, with a bit of ice falling off the. You don't hook the beef off of these, like if they were hinds or Alford, you don't unhook them, and they'd put it, or if it was fours, they'd put them on your back, so you're running around like that, then you throw them off. And you had to really flow them, you know, they had to land in the right spot, you know what I mean? And first of all, they said to me, you go on the hooks, son, you go on the hooks, just for a little till, you know, because, you know, I started work with them, but you're too slow, you know, we can't, no, you're in the way, you know, like, you go on the hooks, because you can't come up with the speed of it, you know.
Crikey.
Obviously, over time.
Yeah, you get faster.
I remember once we had a bloke come in, he was a coalman, and he just come in the dock. And he, you know, used to take bags of coal round. He said, oh, I can do this, I'll tell you what. And he was being flash as well, you're being flashy, new young bloke, flashes and everything, coming in, yeah, I'll do this, I'll do that. We had to sit him down, in the corner while he was trying to recover. He was absolutely knackered. Yeah, I mean, and you used to go home, well, I live in Hainault, I'd go home by train, you know, like, and some of the stuff you did was absolute horrible stuff. No baths or nothing. If you went, the only place sometimes you got so bad you had to go up the local baths. When I say local, East Ham, from the dock, which is a bus ride away, to go and have a bath before you went home.
Oh really?
Yeah, it was. I mean, you went in these big deep baths,
So you had no bath at home?
But there was a bloke, another rebel bloke, who, you know, like you meet people, don't you? And he lived in Loughton, this bloke, Debden Estate. He was, this is the thing, when I went in 1960, there were still people there working who had been in the war and everything, you know. This bloke, I can't remember his name was John, but I can't remember his second name. But he was a character, this bloke, honestly. He'd been in the war, he'd been in Japan. He was there when they dropped the bomb on Japan. He was a prisoner of war in Japan when they dropped the bomb on Japan, you know.
Wow.
He didn't give a monkeys about nothing, you know, that bloke, honestly. When we got dirty, this is where it fits, when we got dirty, filthy jobs, but stunk, fish meal, for example, absolutely reeked with smell. He would love going on the underground and all the city types. He deliberately couldn't wait for everyone to go, oh my God, you know. And that was the sort of character he was. Right. He didn't give monkeys about no one.
Yeah.
Well, how would you? You know, you've just been through the war, you've been in a Japanese prisoner of war camp, you know, do you think you care about what other, you know, like that they're going to tell you what, do you know what I mean? You've experienced death nearly, and you're not going to put up with no one, are you? And that was what he was like. And there was lots of characters down there. And but anyway, I joined, so when I go down there, obviously I'm a member of the party. I'm looking now for, I can see party members, I know who they're going to be. I'll sort them out. And they say, well, come to the branch, and I go to the branch.
Was there a branch in the dock?
Yeah, a branch in the dock, in the dock. We had all sorts of speakers.
Yeah.
We had, just trying to think, Palm Dutt, you ever heard of him?
Yeah. Was it Phil Paratin and all them kind of people?
No, we never ever had Phil Paratin, but we had, I think his name was Morton, I can't think. It was a professor at Cambridge.
A.L. Morton.
No, it wasn't Morton. I don't think it was Morton. This was a bloke who recruited subsequently the Cambridge spies.
Right.
He was a member of the Communist Party. Right. He was a professor, I think, at Cambridge. Right. And eventually it turns out he was the professor in Cambridge who recruited them into the Russian intelligence, I think. But as it, you know, so, I mean, this is the thing, Palm Dutt was a leading scholar at, I think it was at Oxford or something. But, you know, so suddenly these working class kids, they're being taught by people who teach at Oxford and Cambridge and all the rest of it. So there's a real, I mean, all right, you're not going to get you're not going to get exams and stuff, but these are, you know, not just them, but workers who are educated workers, you know, experienced class fighters as well. So you're getting a wonderful education.
What was the purpose of that? What was the Communist Party doing by doing that, do you think?
Doing what?
Like having those educationals with Palm Dutt and, you know... Well,
it was obviously talking about what happens currently, but also... we covered, as we do, you know, all sorts of philosophical ideas and, cultural ideas, all sorts of stuff, which for a young bloke is absolutely, you know, you love it, you want more of it, you know. It got you, from being sort of kind of in education and found it kind of irritating, the kind of education you got, you know, didn't correspond. When you're getting a sort of education that really is, well, truthful, it's honest, it's about the real things of life, you know, that are really highly important, about changing the society, that you don't have to, I mean, we know that societies have changed over the years, you know, over the centuries and eons. But so
but
we know it can change.
Yeah.
So why don't we change it?
Yeah.
Why don't we change it?
Yeah.
What's stopping us from changing it? I'll tell you what's stopping us. The people in power are stopping us. That's what's stopping. So the only, you know, if you've got a block plug, you don't keep pouring water and you remove the blockage, don't you? Well, they're the blockage, aren't they? So why don't we remove the bloody blockage and get building a society that really counts? So
was it just the Communist Party that was organising in the dock? Was there anybody else organising in the dock?
No, not the Labour Party. In my experience, and I've been all over, they've never organised industrially at all, ever. They might have done, I don't know, but they certainly not in my experience. So
were there Labour Party members in the dock?
only in the sense that at election times perhaps the union activists might campaign on behalf of the local MP, but not in terms that they themselves have learned to become political actors in the sense that we as revolutionaries do, you know.
Did it work? The Communist Party organising like that in the dock and holding those kind of meetings, did it work?
It did, and it did for a reason, and the reason was that there were bands and the union that I was there were two unions: the Blue Union, which was the NS&D, which was the oldest union, which was more like the craft. You could call it a craft union, but if you can call dock work a craft, and it was, in a sense, there was skill to it. I mean, it might seem like it's all just lugging about, but there's more to it than that, you know. But the point is, and then there's the White Union, the mass. It's not just the dockers' union; it's a general union, so it embraces a lot of industries, and so there's always a bit of friction between the two. When I say always, not always, no. In the 1880s, you know, that period, before the 1899 strike, there was quite I mean, the stevedores did manage to help to develop and support, if you like, the new Dockers Union, because the Transport in General, as it was then, Unite now, it developed out of the gas workers and the gas workers primarily GMB, but I think there was T&G workers, but also in the dock industry, transport, lorry driving, stuff like that. You know, that's what they appealed to, and then there was a ban from 1948 from the Berlin airlift. We had right-wing trade union leaders in the Transport in General who banned who moved at the annual conference, but they managed to get a ban on communists holding office. And not a ban on communists, they added in fascists. It kind of, by adding in the fascists and linking the communists to the fascists, obviously, they were kind of tarring them both with the same brush. But so the ban forced the Communist Party to organise more industrially than in previously, you know. So they started developing unofficial committees in the dock. There were no shop stewards. Well, there were a few shop stewards in the PLA, but generally speaking, there was not a shop steward organisation of union, official shop stewards. So the Communist Party stepped into the vacuum, if you like, and developed these unofficial committees, which I went on when I was, you know, went in the dock after a while. And we called meetings, dock gate meetings, and strikes and stuff like that, actions to improve our wherewithal, our wages and our conditions and stuff. I mean, when I went in the dock, there was no such thing as stuff to wear. You bought your own stuff. Well, I remember working on these tea boxes, boxes of tea, and they're all got like tin on the corners. You used to cut your hands to ribbons with it. Until we got leather gloves, it was only organised workers sort of forcing that. It's bloody criminal, really. You'd be constantly going over to Seamen's Hospital having your hands bloody done up and that, because they never provided anything to work with. And it was, and it was all subcontract sort of work. There was the shipping companies, then there was the stevedoring companies, and they were maybe the shipping company over the stevedoring company, but it was treated separately. And to get equipment, you'd nick each other's equipment because you'd all work for different companies, different stevedoring companies. And you'd say, well, we ain't got so and so bars, go and nick it over from them. So you'd all go around nicking gear all the time out of each other. That was what it was like when I first went in the dock. And it was a sort of bit of a dog-eat-dog, although with some good characters in it. And so, but gradually, as I say, the unofficial actions become more and more powerful. But there was a history. I mean, even post-war, my dad was obviously involved. This was Bob's, but they dockers were done for conspiracy, and what it was that during the war there were labour laws. Labour laws meaning there was direction of labour. That is to say, the state had the power to take you out of this job and put you in that job. They directed you wherever they wanted you to further the war forward. So you couldn't argue, you had to go where you was placed. And so they wanted to carry this on after the war, of course. Labour government, right? And then there was strikes, there was a strike, and then dockers were done for conspiracy. They had to go up to the locals, the major local.
Old Bailey.
Old Bailey, yeah. They were up the Old Bailey. Of course, dockers came out and strike over it. There was a kind of half of a riot at the Old Bailey. They were using the horses and everything. But anyway, in the end, they had to chuck the case. They had to chuck the case.
When was that?
Pardon?
When was that?
What
can you remember? What year?
It was just after the war.
Okay.
And remember, a lot of these blokes, some of them had come back from the war and now working back in the dock, right? Like I was telling you that, John. And they weren't saying no shit. They'd been soldiers, so they weren't paying. They weren't going to put up with nothing. They weren't going back to the 30s. That was their kind of attitude, right? I am not accepting unemployment and all the other shit you gave us before. We want to. So they were moving forward. But this is a Labour government trying to control the situation, and I think Labour used the troops trying to break strikes on 16 separate occasions. I think it was Labour the whole, but it might have been the Tories after Labour as well. But they used troops to try to break strikes, right? You can imagine how people felt about that, And
okay, all right. I just want to take you back a little bit then to 1958 and the Notting Hill race riots. Do you remember that at all?
1950. Yeah, I obviously I wasn't there.
Yeah. Do you remember it?
I do remember it. Yeah, in the press and everything. 1958. I would be 23.
Right. So, so were you in the Communist Party then?
58. Yes.
So
I joined in. Well, I think around about 57, 58. I joined.
And did that have any? Did the Communist Party do anything about that? Was there any kind of response to that?
I can't honestly recall. No. Certainly, we weren't involved in any way, no. But I never went as far as I remember, I never went on any demonstrations about it. But this was a new phenomena, and it did break out in the dock, as you know.
Yeah.
But before that, I ended up, Jackie Dash, who was a member of the party, was leading most of the strikes then. He was a very nice bloke. I liked him a lot. Very personable. And then he was on the London District Committee of the party. Now remember, the party when I joined was about 34,000 membership. So quite big, really. And it was implanted in most firms, like I'm talking about, like docks, rail, not so much the rail, but there was mines, shipbuilding. So
car plants as well. The car plants, car factories.
Yeah, car factories. Oh yeah. Oh, every car factory. Yeah. We used to meet at King Street in Covent Garden, the headquarters of the Communist Party at that time, and subsequently found out that it'd been bugged left, right and centre by the bloody special branch or whatever. And so, but we used to meet as an industry, as communists, in the car industry, and subsequently in the dock industry and that, you know. So there was a lot of, you know, mixing and mingling with each other and getting to know one another and stuff like that. But
so did people try to coordinate industrial action?
Yeah, because of these, they didn't just have the unofficial committee in London, they had it in Liverpool, they had it everywhere they could go, they had one. And so, you know, the Communist Party had a bit of weight. And I mean, to be perfectly honest, it seemed the logical thing to be in for a militant worker, for someone who wanted to change what was.
Okay.
But from the being on the committee, I went to East Germany. First time I've ever travelled abroad, you know, because I was on the London District Committee, and I suppose, I don't know the precise figures, but I would guess there must have been about 10,000 in the party in London, probably. You know what I mean? Something like that. I don't know. Not far short of it. Anyway, I'll just turn that.
Okay.
That off. I'll put it on. Oh no, just turn it off. That's it. So there was a bloke. Are you working?
Yeah, still going. Yeah.
Yeah. There was a bloke, and I can't remember his name either. On the London District Committee with me, he was an engineer. He was older than me, and during the war, he'd been on these reception committees. Anyone coming into Britain, of course they're worried about spies and what have you, saboteurs or whatever. So anyone entering Britain during the war had to be processed through a committee. So let's give you an example. If you said, like, they'd say, well, what do you work at? What do you do? You know, who are you? What you know? They'd give a name, a number, and then they'd tell them where they worked and what they worked at. And on the committee, if you said you was an engineer, this bloke would start asking you questions about engineering to try and trip you up, see if you was lying and you weren't that, what you was saying you were. And so a bloke come before him who was another communist. He'd been tortured and some of his fingers were cut off by the Nazis. He had swastikas carved on his body, and he came from, obviously he wasn't, but he had to go to the Isle of Man because everybody had to go there before their case was reviewed and decided that they weren't or they were what they said they were. So anyway, when his case was obviously reviewed, and he went to live with this bloke I knew on the Communist Party, and so they were sending a delegation, and he was involved in it, to Berlin, to East Germany, and would I like to go? Of course I would like to go, you know. Very interested in going. Anyway, I do go, and I meet up at Liverpool Street Station, catch a train to, not Felixstowe, I don't think it was, but the port, you know.
Okay.
And there were, I think, about 5 of us travelling on the train. They were mostly young, a lot younger than me. I was 28, this was 63. They were younger than me. It was a youth delegation, I'm 28, I wasn't that young, no. But anyway, I went. And we travelled to Holland, the Hook of Holland, get off there, get on a train and travel all the way into East Berlin. Now East Berlin is like inside East Germany. Berlin, not just East Berlin, but Berlin was in the territory of East Germany. And so we went there. And I think the journey took us 20 odd hours. But anyway, we got there. And you go into West Germany first of all. Well, you go into East Germany, the East Germans come on the train, check the train and all the rest of it. Then it ends up in Berlin. Then the West Germans come in and check the train and all the rest of it. Then a lot of people get out, obviously, in West Berlin. Then the train goes into East Berlin at Friedrichstrasse station, and that's where we got out. So there's all these people checking you know. Anyway, you get there, the border is bristling with army and armaments, and even the station where we get out, Friedrichstrasse station, it's got lots of military in it. So you're thinking, Christ, you've never seen so many guns and that. It's a bit serious, this, and no one's there. We're thinking, what the bloody hell? What do we do now? You know. As it turned out, they were waiting for us the other side of the station, and eventually they came round and said, we could kind of communicate, but we weren't all speaking German and everything. Anyway, they took us to the trade union centre, and we had meetings with people, and they was having drinks, and then we went for our food, and I noticed the driver came in and he had his food with us. So it seemed all kind of relaxed after that, quite relaxed, you know. And then we started touring East Berlin, and then we went to this place, a dance hall. What was it called? We met this black guy who was studying in East Berlin, because a lot of Africans were studying there, and he offered to take us to this dance hall, and anyway, it was very, very formal. It was strange, it was. You know, if you wanted to talk to a girl, you had to go and formally introduce yourself, and I would like this dance, and it was very much more formal than we'd experienced. Anyway, we stayed there for a few days, and then we went to a place called Bad Schandau near the Czech border, travelling through East Germany by coach and that. And by the way, I met the bloke in Berlin, because he lived in Berlin. I'm talking about the bloke who lived with the engineer, and because I had some coffee to take to him, he said they get a little coffee and everything, so take some nice coffee, and took a few things, and I took some stuff from the General Secretary of the Tobacco Workers Union, and I can't remember his name either. Anyway, that's terrible. And So I gave them to him, and he spoke English. He'd lived in England during the war and everything. He knew he was quite familiar in England and everything. And he was explaining to me their situation, because he'd gone back to build socialism. He was a communist. He wanted to go back straight away to build socialism. And he said to me, you know, he's still got his injuries, and he got a special flat because of his situation. And he said, when I came back, he said, we were literally living on one potato a day. There was nothing. He said they'd gone from the master race to the kind of lowest of the low. They were scrabbling around for food. It was absolutely horrible. And he said there was a kind of psychological, you know, going from the master race to having to scrabble around, there was a kind of sense of defeatedness, and they had to try and get people to raise themselves up by their bootstraps, so to speak. And he said it was so really difficult, you know. And he said not only that, the Russians, he spoke quite openly, he said the Russians came in, nicked a load of, you know, as reparations for the damage to Russia. They nicked a load of any gear that was going, they was nicking it. So they literally were starting over from scratch. And there was no help, there was no Marshall Plan for them or nothing. They had to build themselves up. And then he said, what the Americans did, and the British, but the Americans primarily, is they decided with the French, the French had a zone, the Americans and the French, they put together their two zones for administrative purposes, and they called it Bizonia. And then later the British joined their zone, and that just left the Russian zone on its own. And so they themselves created West Berlin, West Germany and East Germany. Do you see what I mean? So then they didn't stop there. What they did is they introduced a new currency, the new German Deutschmark. And what they did, they got everyone to bring in their old, who were in their zones, to bring in their own old German Deutschmarks in exchange for the new German. And they were playing out at a differential rate. I don't know what the actual, I can't remember what the rate was, but it was like, it lowered the price of the old German Deutschmark, so that, now you can see, some people lived in the Russian sector but worked in the Western sector. So they got paid in the new German Deutschmark. To go back to their own sector, they needed the old German Deutschmark. So they had to exchange the coins or whatever it was they were getting paid out into old German Deutschmarks, a fabulous rate, and they could go back into the eastern sector and buy up everything and sell it into the western sector at a profit. So they were making huge money if they hadn't been working. But if it was a reverse way round, they would be getting, you know, it would work in completely reverse. And it was undermining the East German economy. They were already not being aided anyway. So in the end, they thought, fuck this, we're going to have to build a wall and stop people coming in and out. Can't have that. Can't have it no more. So that's why the wall was built. This was never explained to British people or anything, you know. So, and it's still unexplained, you know what I mean? So this is the complexity they lived on. Now, I'm making an apology for Stalinism, or state capitalism. No, I'm not. But but obviously at the time, being a communist, this quite impressed me. And so I was quite sympathetic towards their situation. But so there were. Do you remember Betty Ambiatilos? Tony Ambiatilos, he was the leader of the Greek Seamen's Union,
Right.
and he'd been jailed. I think it was by the colonels, the Greek.
Right.
And she confronted the Greek royal family and the rest of it in Britain and that, you know. She was a bit of a celebrity. She was on the London District Committee as well, you know.
Okay.
So there were several other people. There was Bert Ramilson, for example, who was, you know, we know what his role was in
Spain.
Yeah, you know. So,
Okay.
yeah, so it was quite revealing being on it, but eventually I become disillusioned with the way the party was going.
Okay. All right. I'm going to just stop it there then, Ed, because that seems like a nice pause.
Yeah.
Is that all right?
Right, yeah.
So what about then?
What do you think so far?
No, it's really interesting. It's really, but so I don't think we're going to be able to get any more done today.
No,
right.
go on, don't worry.
So,
you do what you want to do.
So can I come back again?
Yeah,
next Friday or something like that. If you're around next Friday.
See Barbara, because she knows what our bleeding.
So next Friday I want to cover the Powell, you know, the strike for Enoch Powell.
Yeah.
And what you did about that, how you dealt with that, and then the Pentonville, and then the miners' strike.
And what about the, you know, losing your jobs? That's another strike.
Yeah, no, that's right. The whole period.
See, that kind of corresponds to the kind of social contract. You know,
no,
and
absolutely.
all the rest of it. It kind of.
Absolutely.
All right, 1989 is a bit. But you know what I mean? The effect of the social contract had on the...
The other thing I want to cover is the relationship between the underlying trends of capitalism, like, say, containerisation and globalisation and stuff, you know...
What did you say before globalisation?
Containerisation.
Yeah.
And how work in the dock was changing, you know, how far that change was determined the way that things went or forward, like, was Thatcherism a secondary phenomenon? Was it that the changes in global capitalism that was pushing Britain in a particular direction, and that Thatcherism was just a part of that overall, you know, structural change, or was Thatcherism the determining feature of Britain? You know, that's what's the relationship between the two?
I think the two,
yeah,
like, you know, like, if you like, the mode of production begins to change as Marx describes it, doesn't it? And so this creates political opportunities, doesn't it, as well? You know what I mean? It kind of messes up the workers' internal everything. You know, it kind of starts to the geography, if you like, of the workplace starts to change. And so there are political opportunities.